All right, welcome everyone. Really excited to be here with you today to talk about sales coaching and onboarding and how it's going to impact pipeline. I think we're waiting for a few more people to join here, and then we're going to get started. Can everyone see my screen all right?
Yep.
Great. Okay, well, again, welcome everyone. My name is David Lomber. I'm the CEO of ScentCloud, and we're really excited to be here today to talk to you about sales coaching and onboarding and how it can impact pipeline, really in any economic environment. But I can't think of a better topic to talk about today. We're talking with companies all the time about how do they get more out of their existing teams and how do they plan for the future without necessarily knowing if they can hire a lot more people. So obviously coaching and onboarding is critical to do that. Really honored to be moderating this session with Ryan, Jessica, and Jenna today. I'll let each of them introduce themselves and then we can get right into the panel discussion. Ryan, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so excited to be here. I'm Ryan Danielson. I'm the Senior Manager of Inside Sales for Johnson Controls. Been kind of in the sales side for more than 15 years now. Started with retail, jumped over to some outside sales, then kind of brought me to inside sales, which was kind of a lot similar to the retail environment and culture that I really, really love. Just that team atmosphere, the coaching, the leadership, all of the things. So really, really love it and excited to be here.
Great. Jessica, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thanks, David. Really excited to be here. Nice to virtually meet everybody. Jessica Nelson. I am the Senior Director of Sales Development at LeadIQ. Have, similar to Ryan, been in this space for just about 15 years. Have been building SDR teams for probably the last 8 of that, just working on really facilitating great onboarding, training, and coaching programs. So really excited to talk with everyone today about that.
Okay. And Jenna, you want to close us out?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenna Stahl, and I'm a part of the ScentCloud team. And here at the ScentCloud, I've been here for about 4.5 years. I started out as the first account manager brought on, and through my experience here, I've been able to kind of be a part of its growth to the team that we're at today. And recently been moved into a team lead role, which helps manage some of the newer account managers. So I've really been able to kind of experience that as a newer experience of helping to get new team members up and running as part of our account management team.
That's great. And I'm just going to embarrass everyone just a little bit here. We're lucky to work with Ryan and his team and how they use our level 11 solution to help coach their sales reps out in the field. And we've had the opportunity to work with Jessica for a long time. These are great thought leaders in their space and really care about coaching the individual performers, but also coaching managers and how do they enable their managers to be more successful. So just embarrassing them a little bit. And Jenna, as she touched on, works with some of our largest customers out there. So I think she'll bring an interesting perspective there as well. So some of the topics we want to talk about today is, how do we define what coaching and onboarding means? And that may vary based off of if you're an individual contributor, manager, director, or more senior manager. Certainly talk about the differences between managing and coaching and what really makes a great coach. And then tying it back to, obviously, we want to make sure it's impacting performance as well. How are we actually driving pipeline generation through better onboarding, better coaching, and in some cases, re-onboarding, which we touched on here in this last topic of how do we coach and re-onboard our veteran sales staff? And that can mean re-onboarding in a hybrid work environment like we often find ourselves in today, or just maybe resetting expectations if you're coming into a role as a manager, as I know Jessica is with LeadIQ, or maybe resetting expectations with a more senior person on your team. And just kind of opening it up for discussion there, I'd love to kick it over, and let's start with you, Jenna. we at Ascent Cloud and a few different of our partners have done a lot of research around, companies reporting that onboarding is a serious challenge. And we'll cover some content later that's available in a research brief with the Sales Enablement Society. But Jenna, what have you seen in terms of how do you set goals and expectations for new hires, both with your team and also when you're talking with companies that are trying to onboard at hundreds, if not thousands, of reps all the time?
Yeah, something that I hear a lot from some of the enterprise customers I deal with is that they have a lot of new people coming in all the time, and how do they get those new hires to feel like a part of the team, but also have goals that are attainable? And so I think there's a lot of instances where someone that's a new hire might be on a ramp type of plan where they've got different goals than everybody else. But how do you have them, by using Salesforce or by using the tech that you have, be able to show them as still part of the team and, have different goals than everybody else, but still be able to have achievable goals? And I think things that we can do to help support new people is, have that inclusion to where you might be new, but you're still part of the team, but also adjusting goals as things go. If somebody's having a really rough start, you don't want them to have the same goal they've always had and continue to kind of get beat down and not feel encouraged. So I think being able to see which behaviors are working for people, where to pivot, and really to help with coaching them to come on board and enable them to have that success right off the bat is something that can be really important. It's all about setting those goals, staying close to them, coaching through that first few months to get them to be a part of the team and kind of understand what the role entails.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback too. I think it's so important, and you hit it right on the head, Jenna, is like setting up a new associate for success, right? Like I've been in a lot of instances where maybe we didn't do a great job at setting the right quota out of the gate. And maybe we forgot that, like, hey, this might take 3 to 6 months to ramp. And you give them a full year's quota right out of the gate, and you're just setting them up for failure out of the gate, right? So I think it's so important to make sure you're strategic about that. And like Jenna said, like making them part of the team and making sure that they're set up to success to hit those goals, so they come in, feet running right out of the gate.
Yeah, and I'd say to echo on that, Ryan, one thing that I really try to focus on is showing people what good is, because it's really, easy to show someone, here's your metrics, here's what we expect of you, here's your quota, to your point, like this is how we've spaced it out over your ramp time. But if you take the time to explain to them, this is what good looks like, this is what you're trying to get to, and here are the steps to get there, then it really allows them to look at their own skill set and figure out what is the path.
Yeah, transparency, always good.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, a couple takeaways there for those in the audience. I heard, ramping goals, which I love that idea. And how do you kind of do that systematically as you're ramping someone in any role? Loved Ryan's, comment around setting them up for success. So, understand that it does take time. Obviously you want it to be as fast as possible, but being realistic and attainable. And Jessica, I agree, like they need to know what they ultimately need to get to. And like, what does a fully ramped person look like? What does good look like? I love that. And so let's tweak it a little bit. So we talked about, setting people up for success. Ryan, and you kind of alluded to this before, what are some of the mistakes that a manager can potentially make when they're onboarding a new hire?
Yeah, I think I've seen, some of it's just time, right? Like making sure that you're setting up the time to commit for one-on-one time with that rep, setting the expectations for that rep. I've seen kind of both sides of the coin where, honestly, I've had managers where we didn't have that time coming out of the gate. So you're kind of like, all right, well, who do I lean on, or where do I go? Or, there's a lot of uncertainty there, right? So I think making sure that managers set up some sort of mentor, first of all, someone good on the team, you talk about what that mentorship should look like. And then just making sure you're carving out time. I think sometimes we rely too much on, in some of our cases, we've got maybe coaching or onboarding folks that kind of take on that role at the beginning of the rep's term. But how do you as a manager play into that part as they're coming on board, and making sure that you're dedicating the time for that piece of it? So I think, when someone new is coming on board, making sure that you're spending the time setting expectation, getting a mentor set up for them, And again, setting them up for success is so important right out of the gate.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I love that mentor piece, Ryan. And, I think it's just so critical that they have someone in addition to their manager and, anyone else that they can really ask questions to in their day to day. And then it turns into this resource where it's someone who's been there, who's experienced the same things that they're going through, right? Perhaps they had gone through onboarding recently as well. So it really allows them that place, like a safe space for them to ask questions that maybe they don't feel as comfortable asking to their direct manager.
Yep. And I'll even add too, like, I think sometimes we think we know our team and we don't maybe give them the opportunity to mentor, right? And sometimes reps need that push a little bit to become a mentor if it's the right fit, obviously. But like, that's also stretching someone else on your team, and it gives them a little bit different aspect of it too. So I think sometimes going to your team and having that conversation with some of your performers will get them to the next level as well.
Yeah, and I think what's great about any sort of mentor program is like, when you're new, you're coming into a team, whether they're in a virtual environment like today, or if they're in the office, they might not have a lot of exposure to additional people at the organization. Through a mentorship, I know I've got my manager, but now I have a new person that I can create a bond with, learn more about their experience at this company. And as they continue to grow, I can kind of see different career paths that lead to longer retainment. And I think whenever you are dedicating that time to a new hire, you never want to talk about, turnover or anything, but it's an investment, and you're investing in a new person. You need to invest the time to help build a longer career with that organization. So the time and the mentorship are just two great routes to keeping people with your organization longer and happier.
Yeah, I love that, Jenna, like, especially with the, like, showing someone what their career path is in front of them, so they understand, I've joined for these reasons, I'm super excited, right? The most excited someone's going to be is probably on day one, and then really giving them that opportunity to see, here's all the amazing opportunities that really reinforce why I've joined the company, and all the ways that I can learn and grow in my own career.
That's fantastic. And, I loved a couple things you guys said there. One is, making sure that we're not relying on, Johnson Controls, Lead IQ, and all. There's anywhere from medium, large to very large companies may have additional sales enablement resources or coaches. So I like what Ryan said. Don't rely on others too much. Make sure that you're spending the time as your manager. Love that. And the mentoring, Jessica, I think you touched on it. And I know you've grown people from mentors into managers in your career experience, which is fantastic. And, Jen, I'm sure you went through that as a mentor, and now leading people yourself. So that's fantastic. A lot of good things there. And I am curious, actually, kind of a follow-up question of that. So we talked about mistakes. So in order to avoid those mistakes, do you guys use any 30, 60, 90 onboarding plans or, milestones along the way? Or how do you make sure that you're staying on track with your onboarding plans? Sometimes that's with technology. Sometimes that can be more old school with Google Docs. I mean, how do you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, I could take that. So I generally have, to your point, David, like a 30, 60, 90 that shows, here's what you should expect to get through in week one. Here's what success would look like. Here's what in the first 30 days you should have an understanding of, these 5 things, these technologies that are part of what you're doing every day. 60 days, here's what you can expect from, your in month 2 of ramp. We'd expect to see this amount of, a fully ramped quota. These are the things that from a product perspective, you understand this. From a process perspective, you're able to run this part of the process. And then from a 90-day perspective, being able to look back and see, here's the progress I made from where I started to here's where I'm at today. Ideally, that's living in some type of technology that really allows you to track it and monitor and have those milestones in place. I mean, there is always the old school Excel, Google Sheets, but I think being able to show that to someone, possibly in day 1, but probably in like day 2 or 3, and say, here's the different milestones you're trying to get to. Here's how we're going to measure them. Here's all the points that we're going to have check-ins to just look specifically at at those pieces.
Love it. Yeah, Ryan or Jenna, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just, go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just thinking about one of the largest customers that I work with. They have an extensive training program. So if they get a new hire or somebody transfers into kind of a sales role, they have to learn, they go away to camp and they learn about all of their product, and then they learn about how to use Salesforce, and then they're just thrust into the field. Now go sell it. And I think that it's important to, of course, understand the product and the tools, but actually understand the behaviors that you should be doing on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that a lot of the people that I've worked with and kind of incorporated some of the, scorecards and level 11 tools that we have available, it's been able to give them that, well, okay, I understand what I'm selling and I understand how to put that in Salesforce, but how do I actually go about this? And so I think giving the behaviors and like showing them, here's what you should do every day, here, whether it's a 30, 60, 90 plan, here's what you should do every day for the first month. But now that you've got all the equipment, what do I do? It's 8 a.m. on a Monday and I've been trained, now what? And I think filling in those gaps of setting the behavioral expectations is something that can really help as someone gets ramped up, and you can adjust those as they, figure out another thing and then figure out another thing.
Yeah, and I was just going to add too, I think, one of the things that we played around with, obviously coming out of the pandemic and COVID and everyone's working remote, and we were hiring people and they were 100% remote, and we're doing everything kind of, over Teams and video. Well, when we became hybrid and, we kind of went that way over the last probably 3 to 6 months, we started kind of playing around with, all right, should we bring people in the office to begin with? Or because ultimately you're going to be working from home more than likely, do we start there? And we played around with that. And what we saw was people got onboarded quicker. They understood the content a lot better when we brought them in the office and it was in person. And then the manager had 30, 60, 90 days to actually go through with that hands-on. And then once they feel comfortable, then we can let the rep kind of say, all right, if you're comfortable kind of working where you need to work, we can go back to this hybrid mode. But working in person and seeing that, interaction one-on-one, we just saw it expedite the onboarding process too. So I think there's some validity to that, of working in person when you're bringing on new hires to get that, what you're trying to get across to them.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much to follow up with, and I'm sure we'll get questions on this later. I loved the 30, 60, 90-day plans. Jessica, to your point, whether you're using something like Level 11 or not, just make sure you have that in place, because it's so important, whether you're using technology or even Google Docs or Google Sheets. It's so important. So definitely be doing that. I liked what you said, Ryan, of finding what works for you, whether it's hybrid or in person, for that onboarding experience. And Jenna, you just reminded me of, with the scorecarding example, of a plug for the book, 4 Disciplines of Execution. I think we have some fans of that in this group. But really the showing people how they're doing in real time is so important, so that they know when they're doing a good job, whether it's onboarding or full time. But I have to turn it over to Jessica now, because I think you were passionate about the concept of re-onboarding. I'd love to hear, your experiences with that, and, how you approach re-onboarding, whether it's new team members or existing team members.
Yeah, and I think it's this really interesting concept where, and it could be anything from your switching sales methodologies, right? I've taken people from like a VSA to a Sandler, or you're introducing some type of new tech, or perhaps there's just like an entirely new taxonomy from a product perspective that you need everyone really to understand and grasp. So I think the biggest piece of re-onboarding is explaining the why and making people understand that this isn't just a refresher. This is new information, or some type of information that isn't in what you're doing in your day-to-day. Here's how we're going to measure what this looks like, as going for what good looks like, and then just really breaking it into smaller digestible chunks. Because at this point, if you're re-onboarding, the team is probably in their activity day-to-day, right? They have a full quota. You can't just do what you would do with a new hire, where you're pulling them off the floor. Maybe you can take them off for half a day, ideally at the start of a quarter, but it's not something where you can just say, okay, we're going to take you all for a week and forget about targets and quota. So it's really figuring out what's the right order to get this information, what's the why behind it, making sure the team understands and is bought into the reason why you're essentially doing some type of reboot, and then having some real measurables at the end to say, at the end of this session, this is what the team will look like. This is what they'll be able to deliver on, and this is how we're going to gauge success. Because it's obviously a big lift from both a time perspective as well as from a resource perspective.
100% makes a ton of sense. And I'm sure there's questions from the audience, and please type those in as we're going, because I know there's a lot of great content we want to cover with onboarding, but we need to shift over to coaching now, because that's obviously a huge portion of what we're talking about, and we'll be sure to save time at the end to answer questions. But I do want to switch over now to a quick little lightning round of we're switching to coaching now. And so someone's onboarded, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining those skills and coaching them over the long term. But I'd love to just hear from each of you in a sentence or two what you think the difference between coaching and onboarding is. Ryan, let's start with you.
Yeah, when I think about
managing, excuse me, I said coaching and onboarding, coaching and managing, excuse me.
Yeah, coaching and managing. So I think, David, when we kind of met earlier in the week, we talked about kind of sports analogies, and I think it's interesting because I always refer back to that. And you think about football and specifically, and each football team has a head coach, which is usually the manager, right, of the piece of it. But they have to kind of do both things. They have to coach and manage, but they also have individual coach positions, right? So those coach positions are to specifically help each position get better at what they're doing, right? Running back, quarterback, throwing, whatever it is. So like really in the coaching piece of it, your job is to help get that rep or that position better, right? Walking the side along with them, helping them improve. And then the managing piece of it is kind of the overall aspect to it. You're gonna probably coach for sure, but as well, you're gonna manage the direction, the strategy, things like that. So that's kind of what I think about when I think about those two terms.
Yeah, love it. And Jessica, I'll turn over to you. Difference between coaching and managing.
Yeah, and I love the sports analogy, Ryan. I'd say the biggest thing is managing is really digging in on the results, the metrics, right? What are your core KPIs? How are you achieving them? What does your forecast look like? Versus coaching, where you're really, to Ryan's point, looking at specific skill sets and figuring out how to level those up and drilling in as precisely as you can into how to help that person understand how they can be the best version of them every single day.
That's great. I think I even heard you use the phrase before that, leading indicators are more around coaching and the lagging indicators are more around managing. Is that fair to say?
100%, right? So when you're coaching, I always think of it as two totally separate exercises, right? Where coaching is really talking about those indicators that are going to get you to those lagging indicators, right? So you're working on the leading indicators, you're figuring out conversions, you're looking at all those different things that can move the needle. And then the managing is really talking about what are those end results that you got to.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's hard to coach around close one revenue, but you can coach around, activities or behaviors ahead of that. Love it. And Jenna, yeah, love to turn over to you. Difference between coaching and managing.
Yeah, let's keep up with the sports analogies. I think that when you think of somebody that's, on the field as the coach there, like, a negative thing they could do is they probably were the star of that sport in their heyday. They could take the ball and go and, score on their own. But I think what really makes a good coach is somebody that can stay on the sideline and just spend all that time to enable that player to succeed on their own. And so I think that that's a big thing, is that you didn't just become a manager out of the blue. It was your experience, and you could probably interrupt that sales call or, try to jump in on things. And it's about helping that person do it better themselves, and really just enabling success through, support, not taking things over.
That's great. Kind of the Michael Jordan example of it's, when you're so good at it, it's hard not to, it's hard to be a coach sometimes. But
let me do it. I got it. No, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, no one was better than Michael, so maybe not the best analogy for sales, but and I'm probably love LeBron too, obviously. Measuring success though. So when we get into coaching, we talked about how do we measure the success of the team member and how do we measure the success of coaching overall. So Jessica, how do you know when coaching is working, or how do you measure the success of your coaching programs?
Yeah, I'd say that having those really set and clear defined targets with the person that you're coaching, right? And not trying to coach everything at once, trying to bucket it into, we're going to work on your conversations to meetings conversion, right? Or we're going to work on your deals in stage 4 to close 1 conversion, right? Picking something really specific and then saying, if we can increase this by X%, or if you're able to handle 3 more objections a week, or whatever that really specific agreed upon piece of the process is that you have with the individual, and then being able to look back after, okay, 30 days, we said that you would be able to, overcome 2 more objections every week than you were last month. How did this go? Do you feel like the sessions that we did helped? Like, where are there still gaps? Where can we build on this? So having those really specific KPIs that you're looking at, and then being able to drill into, conversions is generally a really, impactful thing to look at from a coaching perspective, because that's where you can move the needle on some of the things, where it's not just putting in more and more, and it's saying, how can we make what you're doing more impactful every time you do it?
Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of, let's say on your scorecard, you have it, your KPIs might be measure your activity and what you're doing, but the conversion ratios certainly tell you a quality of where you may need to coach, if that's fair.
Yep. Yeah, and it's to your point, back to the leading and the lagging indicators, right? Like, what are the things that you're doing today? How can we move the needle on those with what you're doing to really refine your skill and get you to where you're hoping to get to in your career and to that next level of success?
Yep. And Jessica, how are you measuring that? Obviously there's lots of different ways, but how do you measure those different conversion ratios and identify those coaching opportunities?
I think that there's always best in class conversion percentages that you can look at, right? I think the biggest one to me is activity to actual conversations, because it's, the work that you put in, and how can you take that and get more meaningful conversations out of that, and then how can you then get those to turn into meaningful meetings, and then the end results after that. But I think that's like the biggest conversion pivot point, where if you can really refine how the activity that you're putting in is turning into meaningful conversations, that's where you can drive some really tremendous results.
Love it.
The other thing too, like, I think measuring success, and something that in prior companies I worked for that we always struggled with, and we finally put something in place with Level 11, actually, with the coaching platform, was just tracking the actual conversation, right? Because I think about in the past, like, we always had a difficult time of tracking that conversation, or, hey, manager, make sure that you send a recap email to your rep, and something would come up and they would forget or whatever. And now that we've kind of got a process for actually going through the coaching platform through Level 11 and documenting it and going through with the rep, and we've got agreement, and then we can go back and really look at that document maybe 30, 60, 90 days ahead and say, hey, we talked about this 90 days ago, like, where are we at with it? I think this helps tremendously of just making sure that the one-on-ones are happening. And then now we've got documentation that we can go back and kind of look at it. So I think it's been really, really good.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Ryan, because being able to have that document, if you're able to look back at your scorecard and then the coaching document and say, hey, this is what we talked about last week, that last time we met, this is what we've agreed on, and then have the rep be able to go back and reference that. It's just so impactful, because then it's not like, oh, we had this great conversation, what did we talk about, where are we going from here? Because then it's like, well, it's great if we talked about it, but how are we actually tracking and making sure that we're on the same page, and we both heard the same thing walking out of the conversation. So
100%. Jen, I'm sure you have something to add here, because this is definitely something we're passionate about.
Well, yeah, and I think tying in both Jessica and Ryan's comments of, Jessica said a couple times moving the needle, and then Ryan with being able to look at, if you guys do one-on-ones every week, you are going to see tiny little changes, but like little positive changes are what's going to lead to your overall goals. And so I think being able to look at, okay, maybe it was just one more conversion, one more deal that closed this last month. Well, that might not be your overall goal, but that's a positive change. And based on being able to see those small changes, whether it's time stamped in coaching, or you can just look at the scorecard to see how you're shifting a little bit, pacing a little bit better, those small changes are the behaviors that are going to stick with someone and continue to show improvement for the long run.
Yeah, and I'm sure we have plenty of sales leaders on the call. Imagine just shifting your middle of the bell curve of, you look at your rep performance by, let's say, closed won deals. If you could just shift them just a little bit to be more like your top performers, what would that do for your business? Yeah, even if it's 1 to 5% improvements like Jen is talking about. Just the short answer is it'd make a big impact if you get everyone just to perform 5 or 10% better. But we need to keep moving. A lot of good stuff here. Ryan, you touched on this a little bit before, but how are you and your team adjusting to new normals? So you got hybrid, you kind of touched on before, potential changes in macroeconomic environments. Just love to talk about adjusting to new normals in your coaching conversations.
Yeah, and I think I think about culture. Culture is so important to me, and I really try to drive it with my team and staying positive culture. And a lot of that comes with communication, coaching, being open, with our reps, but really coming down to that communication piece. So we do, daily stand-up. So I think one of my challenges, and I try to make it something I focused on in the last probably 12 months is, hey, now that we're remote, how do we take that culture that was in the office and move it to remote, right? We know it's extremely difficult to do, but how do we incorporate that? And we've done a couple things that I think have kind of helped with that. One of them is, the daily stand-up. So everyone's on video, let's talk through it. Again, some coaching opportunities there, but really more so than anything else is breeding that team culture that we can share ideas, right? Giving them the platform for it. I hear so many companies really struggle with hey, how do I brainstorm with my team? Because we know that the cooler talk, right? That's where a lot of great ideas and collaboration with reps happen. How do you kind of put that into play? And I think we've done a good job of doing that from a daily stand-up perspective. We also incorporated, we do it every 2 weeks now as a learning huddle, right? So every 2 weeks we take a topic and we do a 30, 45 minute breakout session with each of our teams and go over it. Whether it's, maybe it's having difficult conversations with customers, or maybe it's, Salesforce cleanliness and cadence and things like that. So really trying to set a cadence up so that we're actually taking time out of our month, out of our week, out of our day to make sure we are coaching and we're doing that. And I think it's interesting as we've developed to that hybrid model and doing it remote over video rather than in person. But we've seen a lot of success for it, and really just trying to drive that positive culture. And I think the communication piece, like I tell my reps all this, I got this from John Gordon. If anyone's familiar with John Gordon, he's the writer of The Energy Bus. Super, super good motivational speaker, talks to a lot of sports teams, and that's where I get a lot of the analogies from. But he talks about, lack of communication. What's going to put in that is negativity. So the more communication you can have, the more positive you can kind of push into your organization, the better it will be, right? So I think that's what we're trying to breed is a lot of communication, a lot of time with the reps, and a lot of time for that coaching piece of it. So I think it goes a long ways.
That's great. Anyone else? Jessica, can you comment on, I know you've done both in-person and hybrid, and you're more of a remote team now with Lead IQ. Love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've historically, the teams that I've had have always had at least a handful of the team being remote. So it wasn't necessarily a giant shift. But it was something that I always had to manage the team for. So if we had folks in California and folks in London, right, how can we make sure that no one feels disconnected from what's going on with everyone? So very similar to Ryan, having the daily stand-ups, making sure that everything is over communicated, where it's not something that a small segment of the team is getting. So really having that idea of over communication, right? And I think that one of the things that I always emphasize to the team is, if you have a question, there's a really good chance that at least one other person has a question. So please pose your question to the group. And if anything is taking you, 10 minutes, I have the 10-minute rule is what it usually is. then ask someone, right? Because if you're struggling with a Salesforce report, or you are struggling with how to get an email set up for your prospect, or anything like that, just, tag in one of your teammates, tag in your manager. Someone's probably going to have some idea on that, and putting your brains together will likely get some great results. So
love it. And Jenna, I know I want to turn over to you, but I know we got to keep moving because I want to get to some questions. I would shout out to Jessica. If people in the audience have questions, I'm sure someone else has the same question. So great point from Jessica there. Jenna, you want to close us out and talk about how do you then leverage technology? As it could be as simple as a Google Doc or something like that, but how do you leverage technology to help with your coaching conversations?
So I feel like I've had a lot of different experiences. I've been here for 4.5 years. I worked at Salesforce. I've been in a lot of different places where everybody coaches. Everyone thinks they're great coaches. They think they're tracking everything great. But I've never had, a tool like the Level 11 coaching. And this is total plug, but I love this tool because I think that, a Google Doc is great. Things can always get changed. You lose it, whatever, it's not as easy to go back and look at the old information. I think with the tool that we have here with coaching, it is so amazing that it is plugged into Salesforce. So all of those activities that you're doing, we already talked about the activity snapshots that are included in there, but I think it's great that, every week when I have one-on-ones with my team, we have templates that are set up that are my style and the team style. So I already know exactly what type of things are going to be important to us. We have links to reports we want to look at. It's all right there in a place. They fill it out ahead of time. I add notes throughout, and then it's time stamped. And so when you're looking at things like quarterly reviews, annual reviews, you don't have to search back through one 40-page Google document. You've got it all kind of highlighted. What actions were you going to take? How did your trends change over the last 6 months? And I just think that being able to have something that's tied in with where your activity is stored in Salesforce and also time stamped, it's just the technology that our coaching guide provides is just made my first time of being a manager something that is so much easier and clear to understand how we're measuring success.
Yep. Just to piggyback off that, I was in a different panel discussion not that long ago, and we talked about manager enablement being a big challenge. And I think that technology can certainly help first-time managers or someone coming into a new role as a manager understand their team better and have more productive coaching conversations. Because obviously we always want to do training on how to be a good manager, how to be a good coach. But if the technology is reinforcing that, I think it can really help in a variety of circumstances. So thanks for touching on that. I do want to open up for questions here, but a quick aside here. If you have, after this session, if you haven't had a chance, definitely stop by the Ascent Cloud booth for additional resources. We will have links in there for driving impact with sales coaching and onboarding. This is a research study we did with Sales Enablement Pro earlier this year. So a lot of great content in there, a lot of great research around how you can make an impact with sales coaching and onboarding. But I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen now and open it up for just questions from the audience.
I can't believe someone had to put a picture of Michael Jordan in there. Hopefully everyone knew that reference, David, that you put out there.
Yeah, I'm seeing one from Elliot Garcia with a pretty nice dunk over the Lakers. I don't know if there's any Lakers fans or Jordan fans out there, but we're going through the panel right now. Great comment here from Stephanie Villafana, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's names, but she said earlier to agreeing that immersing yourself in a new product when you're not physically immersed in it's tough. Here's a great question from Elliot Garcia. What is the first stage in the onboarding process? Who wants to take that one? What is the first stage in the onboarding process? It can obviously be different by companies. Jessica, Ryan, I'll let you guys just comment from your experience of what's the first stage in your onboarding process.
I mean, and this might be a little too rudimentary or basic, but I think just the welcoming is the most important part and the real first stage, right? And just drawing out, this is what to expect over like onboarding is going to last this amount of time. These are your resources. These are the people to go to with questions, and just making the person feel so excited and welcome, right? And remember why they were like chatting it up to their friends and family over the weekend before that Monday when they started, right? So I think that it's, in my mind, the first step, but also like the most critical step of onboarding is really laying the stage for, this is what it's going to look like for you. This is why we're excited to have you. And here's all the things you can expect.
And I think there's even like something you could say for pre-onboarding too, right? Like what's the stage before onboarding? Because sometimes it's that communication to your new rep of like what to expect day one, who are you going to meet day one, like what's the first day look like, and really setting that expectation. Because I've had experiences where a rep would come in and be like, I didn't know that I needed my driver's license. I didn't know that I needed, lunch the first day, like, some basic things that you wouldn't really think about, but the rep comes in not knowing some of that stuff. So like that pre-onboarding, I think is just as important as that first day. And Jessica, I agree 100%. Like just that warm welcome, like we do like a tour around the building, like where's the bathroom at, like some important things that you want to get through, right? To make them feel welcome. But yeah, I think it's super important.
Yep. I love all that. And I think kind of tying it back to, documenting it, whether it's part of a 30, 60, 90 day plan or something you send out ahead of time, and then something you refer back to with those milestones, I think is fantastic all along. Again, aside from the great Michael Jordan picture in here, which is always fun, I liked, there was some comment here around team group chats working well for people. Have you guys utilized that at all to kind of help with coaching or onboarding, but can you guys speak to team group chats at all in your experience?
Yeah, I have some teams that do really, really well with it, and I have some teams that struggle with it. But it's there. We use Microsoft Teams, and each of them create their own team chat that people can go in there and do it. And sometimes what you'll see is the manager is kind of muscling a little bit, and the team hasn't got to that point where maybe they're comfortable or they want to have that interaction. But I'll tell you, the teams that really embrace it as kind of like that place where you can just kind of like have fun, right? Because that's what we're trying to drive is like, hey, do some memes, do some GIFs, like have fun with each other a little bit. But that's also a place where you can ask questions too. And I'll tell you, the culture of those teams that get it are just phenomenal, right? Like you can just go in and feel that culture, and it drives through those team chats. So I'm a definite advocate of that when it's done the right way, for sure.
Yep.
And yeah, I 100% agree, Ryan. So I've had it where the team has like their own private chat, and then there's like the bigger broadcast chat for the overall org, where the team is just always like, they're always chatting in the chat, right? And then they have their own sub chats, but they know that it's like this safe place where they can ask a question, and someone, one of their peers, one of the folks on the team is going to be able to answer. So it's, I think to your point, the more communication that's going on in those chats, especially when you have like a globally dispersed team, or if you have like a whole bunch of people who are remote, it really brings that like feeling of community together. If, I'm a huge emoji person, but like the more emojis, the better. But
yeah. And just there's a question also, what's better between Slack and Teams? I think it's, I think they're both great. I've used them both myself, and I'm sure other people have strong preferences one way or the other. For any level 11 customers on there, the good news is we have a Slack integration today to post wins and milestones and badges as soon as they come in with Slack today, and we'll be having Microsoft Teams here soon. But I don't know, last 30 seconds, go around. What do you guys prefer, Slack or Teams? I don't think there's a wrong answer here, but Jenny, do you want to go first, Slack or Teams?
I've only had the experience with Slack, so that's what I'm voting for.
Yep. Jessica?
Pros and cons to both, so I can't pick. I've used both. I won't vote.
Okay. Conscientious objector, Ryan. We got 5 seconds. What do you think?
Well, I've only experienced Teams, so Teams all the way. All the companies I've done, just Teams. So.
No, it's great. Well, again, thank you for those of you who joined us today. Really appreciate it. I think we got through all the questions. And again, really good discussion. For those of you who haven't had a chance yet, definitely check out the Ascent Cloud booth. We got a lot of great resources there, including more information on sales coaching and onboarding. And again, looking forward to continuing the discussion at the booth. Have a great one. Thanks, guys.
Bye.